This week we have Mike Hugenars, and Mike is a management consultant with over 30 years of experience and a leader with demonstrated ability to turn strategy and vision into results with a progressive approach to process improvement and next level growth. He is currently consulting for Jenny, helping management teams turn their strategy and vision into results, leveraging best practices of ITIL. And if I actually pronounce that, Mike, you can actually correct me when you come on if it's Jemmy or Jemai. Mike specializes in best practices in project management, including governance, risk, and organizational change management. Mike has been a previous presenter on Thought Rock Live, and we are happy to have him back. I'd like to now turn it over to Mike, and again, just to let everyone know when it comes to questions, as Jeannie mentioned, a couple of things. One is if it's a question I think we can do without interrupting the flow too much, I'll ask Mike on the fly to answer some questions if you post them, but just be a little bit patient, and if I don't get to your question, we'll definitely get to it by the end of the session. So just if I can ask for the patience for those that their questions might get delayed a little bit. So Mike, I'd like to turn it over to you. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Rick, and welcome. Thank you for the introduction, and yeah, it's Jemai Consulting. I welcome everyone today as I share with you some of the practical experience that and the tools that I used while implementing ITIL into actually the IS organization at Toyota Canada when I was there for almost 25 years. My experience in ITIL started with ITIL version 2, which started back in the early 2000s. And I got my manager's certificate there and implemented the processes of ITIL into the IT departments of Toyota Canada over a 5-year process of time. Now, to give you a little bit of a history and background, it was early 1999 that I moved back into the IS department to head their mainframe operations through the Y2K transition back then. And when I moved back in there, IS department was fairly green, and there was a lot of issues and problems that they were experiencing over that period of time. And one day my boss comes up to me and says, "Mike, I need you to do something about all these failures that we're having and seeing in the mainframe area. It seems that every time that something changes, we're down the next day." So with that challenge in mind, I set an ultimate goal at that point to eliminate outages due to changes. Now, you may seem to think that, well, that's a pretty lofty goal to totally eliminate changes, but it was a vision of mine for my group and my department to eliminate and to strive to eliminate all the outages due to changes. And you also have to remember this is Toyota Canada, where the ultimate pursuit of perfection is part of their mandate. So with that goal in mind, I looked at where we were today, and I saw that we are currently experiencing 1, maybe 2 outages every month. And as I broke it down and drilled down to the root of the problem, I found that it wasn't really that we didn't have change process at all, but I knew that we had some process in place, but it was broken. It was lacking best practices. It was not consistently executed on, and we had few measures, if any, on how we were doing. So now, remember, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, ITIL was nowhere where it is today. At that time, I took a look at IBM and Microsoft for a little bit of guidance. But then, as I researched further, I found the newcomer ITIL was. I found that the newcomer ITIL was where we should be heading, and with that, and I saw that they had a very solid background in Europe, and they're gaining momentum here in North America, and I knew that this was the direction we should take. So I presented my plan to make ITIL our framework for operations, and soon after I gained agreement to reorganize our operations and desktop support areas and establish agreement to reorganize our operations and desktop support areas and establish the service desk within the department. And within 2 years, we had a basic configuration management database in place, and we were logging incidents, problems, and changes against our end users' desktops and key hardware and software. We were focusing on the goal of improving service uptime and satisfaction with our IT end users. And in meanwhile, I also put in place service level agreements and simple Excel-based chargeback processes for all the services that we were providing to our sister company, Toyota Financial Services. So how did I make that all happen? How did I get the support and the buy-in that I needed to totally transform the way that we worked at Toyota and within the IS department? And I did this through a steady process of implementing continual improvement initiatives. These were all focused on eliminating the gap between where we were and where we wanted to be. Now, I'm sure that many of you are aware of the Toyota Canada's reputation for being the father of best practices of lean manufacturing. And at Toyota, we were referring that to be the Toyota production systems. And we also had a culture of what we called the Toyota way. And the root of that culture was based on 2 pillars: respect for people and continuous improvement, or what we called Kaizen. Now, when I first started down the path of ITIL, service support and service delivery were the primary areas of focus. Continual service improvement within ITIL was not really a scope of ITIL processes and framework back then. I leveraged the Toyota way and the lean practices for continuous improvement and Kaizen to move me towards my goal. And I would like to stress that my goals at the time were not to implement ITIL per se, but to implement changes to improve our uptime and our customer satisfaction. The process changes that I put in place were just a means to the end, not the goal itself. Now today, when we look at ITIL and CSI, we see a very close linkage between the two. And many of the tools that I used with Kaizen can also be used with CSI as well. In this presentation, I'll be talking to you about what came to be one of the most important tools and helpful tools in my handbag. It's called the problem-solving flowchart. And with this tool, I was able to more clearly demonstrate the thought process behind the implementation path that I took, and thus gaining the ever so important acceptance and support from my peers and my executive team, as well as all the teams charged with making the changes on delivering on the strategy I had in place. If we take a look at ITIL, we know through CSI that I'm sure many of you or all of you are well aware of this 7-step approach to CSI. And this aligns really, really well to the lean problem-solving process that I used at the time. And it was helping me to understand what changes I needed to implement, why I needed to implement them, and how. If you take a look at this slide, it helps to understand how they map together, the processes of CSI and the problem-solving processes, an 8-step approach of problem-solving. If you look at number 1 of the CSI process, we begin by defining what we should measure. And here we look at where we want to be compared to where we are now. In the problem-solving process on the right, we see that step 1 and 2 is where we want to clarify the problem and breaking down the problem. This defines what is the gap that we want to close within the problem, and it helps us understand and break down and prioritize what we should be measuring and addressing for our change. The key and fundamental basis to the first step is ensuring that we clearly understand our vision, the strategy, the tactical and operational goals of not only our own areas, but of the organization as a whole. And with that, we can define what is to be our ultimate state for where we want to strive to achieve when implementing any of our changes. And this should be continually revisited and reconfirmed that we are on track. If we look at number 2, we want to define what we can measure. And when we understand the prioritized problem at the point where it is happening, then we can establish and achieve a target that moves us towards our ideal state. Under the CSI processes of step 3, 4, and 5, we gather data, we process it, and analyze the data. In these 3 steps, we make sure that we have the knowledge and information that's needed to get to the root of what needs to be done. With the problem-solving mindset, this is the means of continually asking why until you drill down far enough into the problem to make sure that you are at the core of what needs to be improved. And then finally, we present and implement our plans. And in these 2 steps, the key is to ensuring that we see the plan through to the end. We are continually monitoring that we are on track to meet the targets that are set in the plan, and we are following up to ensure that the plan is not only implemented, but it is institutionalized into the organization. It is documented, standardized, and shared across your areas. Now, if we take a look at this particular slide, this is a flow chart that I developed to help map out and visualize the problem-solving process. And here you can see the various sections and areas of the problem-solving process. First, in the problem clarification, so understanding our gap statement of the problem. Breaking it down into the pieces at the point of the process where it's happening. We set our targets of where we want to be within this particular problem and in solving this particular problem. We then get down to the root cause of continually asking, why is this happening? Why? And then we put in place the countermeasure, we document the countermeasure, we have the plan in place, we see the countermeasures through, we monitor, standardize, and share. Let me go through in a little bit more detail so you can sort of visualize and understand better how you can apply this to your own organizations and your own areas. So step 1 in the problem-solving process, and I've put in place a couple of examples that may help you get a better understanding of where I'm heading here. Problem clarification. So I have at the top end of this the business goal that we ultimately want to accomplish. Now, in my area, one of the key business goals for Toyota Canada was sales growth. So I have on here, I want to make sure that we are continually putting in place things and solving problems to allow us to achieve the sales growth that we want to achieve. But when I started looking at, now when you look at this, you say, well, okay, what's our ideal situation? Well, in this particular example, my ideal is that we have 10 key core services that we are providing support for. And of those 10 core services, we want to make sure that we're meeting our SLAs on all 10 of those services. Currently, we look at the current situation, and we are meeting the SLAs of 7 of our core services. However, our gap is that there's 3 core services that we are not meeting our SLAs. If we're doing this properly and defining our ideal situation, current situation, it should be as simple as a math equation to get to the gap problem statement. Ideal minus current equals your gap. the next step is down to the problem solving, where we start to break it down. So how does that work? So we see that our problem statement is we have 3 core services that aren't meeting our SLAs. And of those 3 core services, we know what those 3 services are. Service 1, Service 2, Service 3. And we look at those services and we figure out ways of determining what the priorities are. Maybe you might want to determine priority based on the number of outages or the impact to the customer, or the maybe there's a predefined measure of importance, which is a critical service and a non-critical service. However your means are, you prioritize that breakdown of the services, and you understand to yourself that this number 1 service is the top service, the most important service that we should be focusing on. Maybe that's, in an example at Toyota, one of the most crucial services that we offered was what we called our configurator on the website, where we could configure our vehicles and actually even order out of that configurator, order the vehicles that we wanted to purchase. So that may be considered a key service, and maybe that was one of the 3 services that weren't meeting our SLAs. Then you break that down further and you say, well, of that number 1 service, what's more important for what is the importance of that? Possibly it's the type of customer. So maybe we have 2 different types of customers with that particular service: a dealer and our buying customer. So then you break it down and say, well, okay, the number 1 importance is the dealer. So anyways, you break down the problem into the smaller pieces, and then you bring the problem down to understanding where within that particular problem it's happening. So for example, if it's a dealer with the website configurator, where in his processes, he might be sitting down with the customer and configuring it with the customer, the vehicle, and that's where he's having the problem with it not meeting the services going down, or it's being slow. So maybe that's where we are running into the problem, that particular problem. So then we define what the prioritized problem is. At this point in time, our number 1 service with our number 1 customer is not getting the SLA met when they're doing the work at a certain point of their process. Now we've gotten the prioritized problem at the point of occurrence. Once we know where it's happening, what is happening, and where, then we can set the target. And in setting the target, we may want to then define what exactly you want to achieve. So we know that we're not meeting our service levels, when at a certain point in the process, and maybe we want to make sure that we achieve the response times necessary when the dealer is doing the work at that particular point of the process. So you establish a target, and then you move down to why the prioritized problem is happening. And that's going to root cause analysis. We look at potential causes, we investigate, we verify. Verify at Gamba is verify at this source, or go to the source. We establish the cause and effect, and we ask why. We continue to ask why until you get down to the root cause of the problem.
And Mike, you talk about on the left-hand side asking why 5 times. I see 4 on there. Is there another component?
Well, actually, the 5 whys is an arbitrary number. 5 is, it could be 2 whys, 3 whys. or it could be 10 whys. We continue to ask as, and until you get down to the actual root, you continue to ask questions. Maybe if I use an example, like the web vehicle configurator. So our SLA for the web vehicle configurator is not being met when the dealers are configuring the vehicle with their customer. Why? Well, the service went down twice over the last 2 months. Why? Well, there's too much traffic and the systems and servers were being overloaded at that time. Why? Well, it was month end and there's so much more traffic and data going through and at that particular point. And you continue down. So maybe that is why. It's because of month end, it's because of the volumes at month end that we're having that particular problem. Does that help you, Rick?
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. So then the next step, once we get to the root cause, we can then develop a countermeasure. And getting to the root of the problem and drilling down far enough, the countermeasures come so much more easily. And you have so much more confidence in that you have the right measures to take. And then you start to see that you develop your plan and you see your countermeasures through. And that's, you know, making sure that you're establishing all the responsibilities, reporting, informing, consulting. Project management is key through this. 360 communications and so on. Good project management practices just to make sure that your project is completed successfully is key to ensuring that you get the buy-in for your next Kaizen improvement that you want to, or continuous improvement initiative that you want to put in place. Step 7 is then continually revisiting and looking and monitoring how you're meeting the targets and goals that you needed to achieve. So when you've implemented your countermeasures, did you meet the targets that were expected of those countermeasures? When you implemented the countermeasures, did you close the gap? Ideally, now there's one more service that is meeting the service level agreements. So you only have now 2 services that aren't meeting the service level agreements within your prioritized problem. And then once you implement, you standardize and you share your practices, and then you move on to the next one, your number 2 service, and so on. So that is the process that I followed in order to either to identify the problems that I needed to resolve and to start marching towards the ideal end state of where our organization wanted to be, in ensuring that we are meeting all the services that are expected of IS, and we're having satisfied customers as well. Now, when you look back on this, you can also see how this can tie into the whole knowledge spiral of ITIL. And you can use the problem-solving practices and processes within each of the levels of the knowledge spiral of ITIL. So at the operational level, you can look at operational problems. At the tactical level, you can start looking at the short-term tactical strategies and problems that you need to deliver upon, and then moving into the strategic management part of the organization. What are the longer-term strategies and the the strategy gap that you have in place, and how do you close your strategy gap of your organization?
And Mike, can you provide, if you have them, can you provide examples of kind of operational, tactical versus strategic problems that you might come across?
Okay, let's see. Operational. So operational is day-to-day kind of issues and problems that you may have. So we have the SLA was missed, and it was the server was down, the server's slow. So how do we make sure that we resolve that particular problem so that problem doesn't occur anymore? Multiple incidents that are all related. How do we then make sure that we're reducing the number of incidents that are occurring? So those are all sort of operational problems that you can go follow the process to determine which operational problem you want to resolve next, what's the most important one. Tactical would be, maybe for example, every month end we seem to be missing our SLA targets at a certain point in time. What do we do? What can we put in place as far as processes to ensure that we're continually meeting our month-end targets? So maybe it's an organizational objective to improve our processes, or maybe it's a longer-term capacity management challenge that we have to put in place to make sure that we have enough capacity within our operational environment to make sure that we can meet month-end growth or capacity at that point. And then the strategic, maybe we look at things that maybe we need to ensure that we have the enough capacity to implement a new brand within our organization. So one key initiative that we had was when our Scion brand was launched, and that was a huge organizational strategic strategic initiative, and it required a lot of strategy changes. We had a huge gap in capacity constraints. We had a huge gap in even how we manage the new kinds of brands and the new customer base that that brand was offering with the younger customers. So those are all the strategy gaps that we had to try to close over the course of years, and as we set our objectives year after year. So as that nicely ties into looking into how this can actually move to the next level with many of you managers out there, and how you establish your strategies of your organization. How do you tie this all into the corporate vision? How do you make sure that your executive teams understand where you're heading and why you're heading there? So with this problem-solving mindset and allowing you to visualize to your executive teams how you're stepping towards their vision and their corporate goals, what strategies you're putting in place to deliver on that is crucial in this particular process. And with that, I even went to the point of creating a one-page kind of summary document to present to the executive teams on what my department was delivering upon as an organizational strategy. And I used the problem-solving process and the problem-solving flowchart, to a certain degree to help visualize that within a one-page document of my strategies. This is what this is. This is my departmental multi-year plan, where I had a section that showed how I clarified my ideal situation for my department and the current situation in my department, and how I wanted to achieve the ultimate goal of the department for my current year's strategies. I looked at divisional priorities, and I broke down the organization's divisional priorities, and then established the tactical priorities of my organization, what I'm planning to do this year and future years. So you can use this particular tool in so many different ways from all levels of the organization. So in summary, I just wanted to show that implementing ITIL was and the ITIL processes for me was a means to the end. It wasn't the objective itself. I was continually looking at the business goals and objectives to determine what processes I needed to improve, and I established a problem, and I leveraged the problem-solving mindset and the processes and tying them into the CSI's knowledge spiral to close the gap to my company goals. And so if there's any other questions, I'm free to talk.
Yeah, no, that's great, Mike. I'll just give everyone a quick chance to post their questions. And while you're doing that, just remind everybody in terms of next week, next Tuesday, that we have our next session is collaborative teaming, how to manage team-based projects. We'll have Julie Rayoum, who is the Director of Development at MindMuse, to be discussing how to manage projects as a collaborative team effort, focusing on the do's and don'ts, benefits and challenges, and why it's important to not have only managers manage. So that'll be next week. So anybody have any questions actually at this point for Mike, and I will let people know as well that any questions that are forwarded to us, we'll make sure they get over to Mike as well if you have questions after the session. Mike, just as we wait here, is there anything else you can think of in terms of your topic that are typical questions that might pop up when it comes to the topic that you discussed today?
I guess the key is to we can tie the problem-solving process is a different kind of mindset that we have for continuous improvement, and I think the main focus is understanding what is the gap we want to achieve. So always continually looking at where we want to be, and revisiting that and breaking it down into the pieces that are the root of the problem. But too often, I think we as IT people want to drill down, and we jump to the conclusions of what is the root of the problem too early, and we tend to skip a lot of the steps of the process, and that in itself sometimes has us jumping to conclusions before we've really looked at all the information and at all the data. Often, just to leverage our own experiences and our knowledge base, we base the solution of the problem, and sometimes that's not isn't enough information to base it on. So breaking it down helps us, make sure that we are asking all the questions, we're looking at all the data.
Okay, excellent. And one of the questions that's come in now is, why did you use the problem-solving process and not the ITIL CSI process?
Well, at the time, the ITIL CSI process didn't exist, for one. It was, ITIL, I wasn't at ITIL version 3 at that point. We're looking at 2003 through 2005 and 6. And version 3 has gone a long ways to tie it all together. And version 3 is, I truly believe, is based a lot on the founding principles of Kaizen and continuous improvement and best practices of Lean. And you'll see a lot of, as I mentioned, there you see a lot of similarities in the two processes.
Okay, excellent. And a couple of questions. If you did, well, here's actually a follow-up question, which I think is great. So that makes sense, obviously, your answer. And then the question back is, if you did it now, and knowing what you know, would you use the ITIL CSI process now?
I would tie it back into the CSI process a little bit more cleanly, but there are steps in the problem-solving process that isn't as clearly laid out within the CSI process. So the steps in breaking down the problem and so on isn't really clearly defined within the CSI process. They talk about, it's a framework, and they do talk about things that you should be looking at and considering, but as a step-by-step process, for example, just looking at a problem and ensuring that you are defining the ideal state and the current state in a way that you can actually, as a mathematical equation, get to the problem.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you again, Mike. I think we don't have any other questions posted right now. And again, if you have any questions, you can send them off to us at Thought Rock, and we'll make sure that Mike gets them. There's no question there. And the slides, a few people have asked Mike that the slides will be available, the actual PowerPoint slides will be available in the Thought Rock library within 24 hours. And there'll also be a link sent out to those participants today for a link to the actual recording of the session. So again, there's two assets here. We have the recorded session, and then we have the PowerPoints by themselves. And the PowerPoints, again, will just be available in the Thought Rock library. So hopefully that helps. I know there's a lot of material, a lot of things probably that people want to go back and try to absorb, and then maybe as a follow-up they may have some more questions for you, Mike, as well. But thank you very much again for coming back and doing a session on Thought Rock Live. We appreciate it. Hopefully we have you back again sometime. So thank you very much, and thanks everyone for attending and sticking with us. It seems like everyone kind of stuck around right to the end, and that's always a good marker of good content and a good presentation. So that is great. So we'll end the broadcast now, and thank everyone. Hopefully we'll see you back next week with Julie Rayoun talking about some project management best practices. And if it is more of a topic that's relevant for another colleague, please forward that off to them, and hopefully we'll have them join us on the call. Thank you again, everyone. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Oh, thank you, Rick.